Hey guys, welcome back to Skyblock. Very recently, well, one day ago, I did post a poll to ask if you wanted to see raycast targeting with a Wyla system or an item database for the next episode, and I do see that you people want to see an item database. So, I'm not gonna lie, Wyla will most likely come right next, so no worries. But the thing is that, there's no clear direction regarding what we need to do. Right now, we're kind of in a state where we do need to add some building blocks that we will be able to use for bigger features. Raycasting is going to be important to create and destroy blocks, and item database will be important to add items and also improve the functioning of blocks. So yeah, today we are doing this item database. So let's just start with first a disclaimer. We're going to make an item database, but we're not going to make any item. The thing is that the way this tutorial is going is I will create things as we need them, right? So at the moment we have no torch, no tools, no things like this. So I'm not going to create those things because we don't implement those yet, if that makes sense. So what we will do instead is that we will prepare the database in and of itself, which will accept items, right? And we will only have blocks, because blocks are items that you can basically place in the world and became physical blocks, but they are items. So technically, yeah, those will be the items that we will create, but we will not create tools at the moment. That's the first disclaimer. Now let's talk about database a little bit. When we say database, it's a very broad concept. There are factual databases, like structures with database languages, like SQL, for example. And there's the more, I want to say, nebulous concept of a database, which basically is all about storing the data in a structure that something different, another entity, let's say the game, can use to take data from it and do things. So in a sense, this array of materials here, it is a kind of tiny database, sort of. So what we will do in this episode is create a more robust and structured database for the items. Something that can be used by the game in general and not just the world node. There are many ways to implement databases, database languages, etc., etc. I'm going to choose a way which is, I want to say, Godot friendly. So yeah, we're going to use Godot native features to make this database, and that's it. So we can start by just creating the structure in and of itself, or we can start by actually thinking about what is it that we do want to see within the database. And this is exactly what we will do right now. We will start by talking about the items that we want to store in that database. So I'm going to create a data structure folder where I will create the block. Well, do I actually need folders in there? Maybe not. Maybe I don't need folders. So I'm going to create a block script, because this is what we will use, and I will create an item script. So why am I separating items from blocks? Because they will have different behaviors. Blocks, we want them to be able to be placed in the world, okay? However, we don't want our items to be placed in the world. When I right-click and want to put a block, I don't want to put my pickaxe, if that makes sense. So because of that, I'm creating this broad category of items which are blocks and can be positioned in the world. So what will happen is that the block object will inherit from all the properties of the item object. So here I will just start by naming the types. We will have the item resource and we will have the block resource. So using resources is always something very confusing for beginners in Godot. Resources is very useful when you want to store data and make sure that this data is not duplicated for no reason. Which means that you don't want to load the information about the stone block 30 times. This is why we want resources here. I honestly can't remember if we talked about resources that much, because we do have materials, but yeah, I'm sorry about that. So anyway, let's just talk about this inheritance thing first. We do want the block to inherit from the item. So what we're going to do here is just remove that resource here and change it for item resource. Which means that when we create a block, it will have all the information contained within the item class. So let's start with a few variables which are going to be common to all the items in the game. First, we will have the key of the item, which is the database index, if you wish, the ID. I like to use the word key because it is the identifier that we use with dictionaries. So here we're going to have a key, which is going to be by default 000 to say that this is the default key. I will also create a name for the item, which is going to be item name. I'm setting default settings or default values so that if we do have errors, that an item is created for no reason and shouldn't be here, it has things to display, right? Like kind of a missing texture. I think I always like to have this kind of, not safety nets, but kind of values that the game can use if something goes wrong. We can anticipate that items will have description. So yeah, this is up to you. You can choose to have descriptions, you can choose not to have descriptions. I'm just kind of exploring ideas right now. Okay. So here is the definition of what an item is at the moment. In our case, we can choose to create those resources with the script, right? We can have a script which creates all the resources we need, all the blocks, and set all the values. We can do that. Or we can choose as a developer to create those files, those resource files, manually and type those information within resources files, and then have the game load those files from the disk with all the important information. And this is what we're going to do because it is a very popular way to go with creating data in games, mostly because it helps non-programmers to actually be able to change things without having to dive in the code. So what we will do is actually create resources files. Resources files, in order to be edited, they need a tag which is the export tag that you just set in front of the variables you want to change. What this tag means basically is that you want those variables to be written on the file, on the disk, when you export them. And this is kind of what we want to do. We want to create those files from the editor, have those variables exported and written on the files, and then to be loaded by the game when it starts, if that makes sense. So now that we do have a data structure for our items, we will start creating just a few blocks. So here, let's create a new folder, which I will name resources. And in those resources, I will create a folder blocks. So in this blocks folder, I will store all the blocks that I do create for the game. So here we can just create a new resource and choose a block resource. I will name it 001 dirt. Okay, so that's the file in and of itself. So when I choose and select this file in the editor on the right, you can see that we find the properties that we created. So all we have to do is edit those properties to match whatever we want this block to be. If you are wondering what I have here, we have the 001 key, dirt name, and description looks like grandma's coffee ground. So this is just the basic we do know about the dirt block. And as you can see, if I just, start the game, and I actually have to choose what I want to start, so I'm going to start world. If I start the game, and just look at this dirt block, we can see right off the bat that we miss some important informations. The material, the texture. But the context is that not every item is going to be a block, so not every item will need a material. So what I will do from there is change the data structure of the block, okay, and I will create a new entry, which is going to be the material. And here we will have a standard material 3D, which by default, I will actually load the dirt material by default. I will load the dirt material by default because I don't have a missing texture yet, so that will do it. So from there, if I go back to my dirt object here, well, actually the load doesn't work, but can I preload? Yes, I do need to preload, that's right. So here in my inspector again, we do see that the material property appeared with the dirt in there. So let's just clear it to see how it works when you want to add one. You can either create a new one, which is not really what we want to do, or you can choose to load or quick load. Quick load will find files which match the type. Load will allow you to browse freely within the folders. So here we're going to choose dirt. Okay. So from there, we kind of recreated the dirt block in the database. We have all the information we need. We can duplicate this by creating a 002 stone, and we have another resource. Here we just want to change, so I'm going to quick load the stone material and change the key to 002. Have stone and a description like it's a block of smooth stone. I know, not very beautiful, but that will do. So the thing is that we do have our two blocks now, our two items. The next thing we want to do is to actually create a database structure that will hold those resources that we do create within the files. So I'm going to create a gray node. So I use gray node a lot in Godot, and the difference between a red node and a gray node is kind of in what dimension or what plane is this node existing, if that makes sense. I almost want to think like, I don't know why I have this image, but it's almost like those things that we do have in the astral plane and the physical plane, right? So like the red nodes, they are the physical plane, while the gray nodes are the astral plane. It's just data, it's just thoughts, it's just information. So here we're going to create a cloud which will contain all the informations of the blocks and the items within the game. So this is going to be a database, so it's going to db items. I will save this node in its own folder. In fact, I will create a new folder, which is going to be Singletons. I know people do like autoloads, but I do like Singletons better. So I'm just gonna save this scene, and we will be able to create a script in there and add a few things. So let's add a class name to that, which is gonna be db items. I want this to be blocks. db items. And at the moment, it will extend node. It will extend node. So, do I actually want this to be a real singleton? I don't think we do need that. But maybe we will. We will use a singleton. That's better, I think. So, if you want to know more about the singleton, I very do believe I have a singleton video. It's a very old one, and I don't know what's in it, but I do trust my past self to be good enough on this topic. So I'm just going to show you the pattern. I'm not going to explain it very fully. So we create a static variable, which is going to be the reference to the one and only unique singleton instance of the database. We create a static variable. I really suggest you to go read documentation about the static keyword, because it is a very important keyword. Basically what it says is that it's a common variable to all the instances of the same class. So yeah, not really wasting too much time on this, because there's a lot of information on this topic, especially the video that I will link. And once you have this static variable, you do actually want this reference to be set at some point. Here we're just checking that if there's no reference, we want the reference to be equal to whatever instance is being created. Else, if there's already an instance in the game, we want to basically remove the instance which is trying to get the place. Okay. That's pretty much what we're doing here. And I usually enjoy having those hidden in a singleton region. So anyway, now we do have the singleton ready. I will actually show you if you still need to copy. We want to create the state database. So I'm going to create a variable, which is going to be, let's call it data. And that will be a dictionary of information. I usually tend to prefer dictionary, even though I do hate very much that we can't type dictionaries. Or maybe we can, but it's very new and I'm not aware of it. But at the moment, as far as I know, we can't type dictionaries. So we're going to create a dictionary. And we're going to add the items to that dictionary. The way dictionaries work is with keys, basically. So how does this look like? We create a key, which is very often a string, but it can be different, I believe. And then we set a value to that key. So here we're going to reload the dot block from the resources, and we're going to reload the database item information. This is how you basically do things. So I actually want, I want to say timing reasons, I want this to exist in the ready function. Okay. The reason for that is because I want to be able to kind of use signals sometimes, and this is just my personal way to keep things clearer. I do know that it is when this node is getting ready that the database is going to be loaded. Okay, this is going to be important at some point in the game. So here, data, I will just have, I will just create an entry, and I will add the preload dirt on 001. And in the same logic, I will create the 002, and I will preload stone. Stone, like this. So the very first thing that I do when this node is being created, I will load resources from the files and store them in a cloud, a database cloud that the game can use. For this database to be accessible from the game, it is necessary that it is part of the game, right? So this node has to be added somewhere in the game. And I'm not gonna add this node within the world, the node of the world, because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Again, think about this gray node in the astral plane of information and the world being the physical plane, right? So it's not while one is defining the other. Yeah, you get my point. So instead, I will create a bigger entity, which is going to be, I often do name this game, but this time I'm going to name this root as in the root of the game, if that makes sense. I'm going to create this root of the game. So in Singletons, I will create root, and there we go. And what I will do, very simply, I will bring in my Singletons DB blocks. Oh no, that's a script, my bad. I bring in the scene, and at the same time, I will bring my world scene in there. Okay, so we now have both entities coexisting in the same space. So I'm not making the root a singleton yet, but it will be later on. But it's not necessary to have this singleton now. So we can now run this scene and find our usual world that we were living in. The difference being that if we do check the remote, we have these DB items which exist in there, and we have a dictionary with two objects in there, the dirt block, and can I go back? Yes, this stone block. Okay, so now this cloud with the database exists, so we can adapt our game to kind of use this information instead of the material arrays we have created there. So let's run down what we're using, and we're going to change things. So instead of creating a material when we create a block, we will use a key to pointing towards the block we do want to create. So here, the very first thing that we do notice is that we have a setMaterial method, but we don't have a material anymore. So let's go in our block scene and see what we have here. We have setMaterial, and honestly, I'm just gonna say setKey. Okay, that's gonna be setKey. And here we're gonna take in a key as a string. So yeah, I'm gonna remove this material property here, and I will change it for a key property. And what I will do, very simply, is make the key being equal to the key. Okay. So once we have the key, which says this is the block we want to create, what we will do is we will load the information of that block. Well, let me rephrase this because it is kind of what we're doing, but because it is a resource, it's a little bit different. We will load in the information of the block that we do want to display, but in order to not duplicate the information each time we create a block, we will instead get the reference toward the block which already exists within the cloud and say, I want to create a visual copy of that. So here I will create a resource, a block resource property. And once we have set the key, we will have the get resource data, if that makes sense to you. So if not key, okay, so if there's no key, we're going to print an error which says a key was expecting a key, and we will return. But if there is a key, okay, we can go in DB items, find the static reference that we created. So I'm just going to show you. Here we created this static reference here, so we're going to get that. And by getting this static reference, we do have access to everything that is under what I have selected, right? So everything that is under it is now accessible through this static reference. So now we do have access to data, okay, and we're going to find the key. So the string is not necessary here. The casting of the key into a string, because it already is a string. It is just for auto completion, because sometimes Godot is a little bit annoyed by this, right? It doesn't recognize the word key right now. So I'm just saying string so that it does recognize it. So anyway, this is how we fetch the resource. So now we just have to assign this to our resource property, and the block is now connected to the resource it wants to display. So from there, all we have to do is, when we have the key, to get the resource data, and then we want to apply the materials. So here we can change the entire settings. I mean, I think we will do that. We'll go with resource.material, because now the material is within the resource, okay? So we will just change this, and let me actually copy this, and I will find and replace. So search, replace, and I want to replace underscore material with this. And yeah, that's a little bit annoying. So I'm going to replace this one, right? Because we do have another underscore that we don't want to replace. And there we go. We do have the materials being applied as before, but by fetching the materials within the database and not from a data which is given by the world when we're creating a block. So here the method setMaterial is now obsolete, so we need to change it for setKey. Is it setKey, or is it because I didn't save? Maybe I didn't save. Where are we? Block here. So we were setting the key, set key, and we send the key. Perfect. Okay, and now CreateBlock. We actually want to have random blocks being created I'm gonna ignore this random row at the moment, and I will just set the key of the block we do want to create, which is a dirt block. Okay, we do have 2 warnings. The class variable materials is declared but never used. Yep, so we can safely delete this guy. Great. And the local variable role is declared but never used. Yes, that is just what I was talking about. I'm very hyperactive in this video. It's kind of annoying. So anyway, now we can just think about something very important. If we do run the world alone, we will have problems because the world is relying on external sources to function, which is the cloud of items. So now we just want to make sure that in our project settings, in run, the main scene that we do want to launch is not world anymore, but it's going to be root. Interesting, I do have a root folder here. So Singleton, root, and there we go. So now we can run the game and see that we land on a patch of ground mouse coffee ground. Just to make sure that our database is working properly, we will go back to the world script and just change this key to 002 so that we can create a ground of stone. So we launch the game and we spawn on a pile of stone. All right, so this is how we basically create a very simple database system in our game. The very last thing I want to talk about very briefly is the loading order. Here, I want you to keep in mind that nodes are being loaded from top to down, and then they're becoming ready from a mix of top to down and down to top. So in other words, we have root, which is entering the tree, and then we will have DB items because it is the first child of root. Or if I want to say root isn't ready yet because all the children of root are not ready. So it instances the first one, database item. Database item is instantiated. And it has no child, so it can be ready. So it becomes ready and loads the data. Then root is checking. It has more children to show. Well, one more child, which is world. So it adds world to the tree. World has a few children, which are getting in and getting ready, one after the other. And when the world is ready, root is ready as well, and the game is going. So it is important to know that now this database is loaded when this node is getting ready. Having a proper organization of your nodes is going to be important. And also you can think about using signals like, I think there's a ready signal. Yes, like tree entered, tree exited, ready signal. So you can use those signals to kind of wait for some entities to be ready to do things. That can be interesting. So that's it for this episode. I hope you liked it. Thank you for watching it. Think about doing the usual YouTube algorithm thing. If you did like the video, like the video. If you want to ask a question or just say that it was a great video, I will greatly appreciate any kind of comments on this side. If you hated it, then that's fine too. I do have some sometimes. And yeah, I will see you in the next video, which will probably be about raycasting. That will be pretty interesting, and we will do a WAILA, which is short for what am I looking at. So we will basically have a kind of token at the top of the screen that will say, hey, here is the block in front of you. Here is its name and its description. That's all I have to say today. You keep practicing your game dev because this is how you get better at making games and actually have more fun making games. And I will see you later.